when you actually want to start brewing, you start with boiling your water. Start with 5 gallons typically. That's what I start with at least. And then you bring that up to a boil. And you take your huge thing of liquid malt extract, and you cut it open and you dump the malt extract in, and then you have to bring it back up to a boil. So that takes a little while. So that's the first step. And then once you actually bring it back up to a boil, it's when you get your hops. Now, depending on what type of beer you're making, you add your hops at different times, and you add different types of hops to change the flavor of the beer. Hops with like a high, it's called alpha acid level, are more bitter, and so that's what you want to use if you're trying to make like an IPA. You'll use your bittering hops early because that's what the flavors that are retained in the beer itself, and you use your aromatic hops later in the boil. Typically, we boil for like about an hour. So for your bittering hops, you'll add like typically like you'll add some like around 10 minutes or like full boil. So you'll add them when you start. You dump some in. Then you'll add some maybe at like 15 minutes. Then like typically you'll wait. Some might get added like later, but then you use your aromatic hops typically with like between 15 and 10 minutes left. You dump them in, and like I'm starting to play with recipes now, trying to think of how to do it. So I've been adjusting, trying to make an IPA recipe actually, and so it's a lot of playing with it because like some kits have more hops than others, and you have to get a feel for it. But it's interesting. So after you add your hops and everything, you have to cool it off. And so at home we have a big copper coil. We put that in it, and we run water through the copper coil and back out into the sink to cool it off as fast as possible. And it still takes about 30 or 40 minutes, at which point you have a couple beers and wait. And you have to keep it covered when this happens, because the huge thing with brewing is keeping everything sanitary, because it's really easy to give your beer an infection, and you actually get like other bacteria in it. You could get other bacteria in it while it's fermenting, and it'll actually kill off your yeast in your beer. It's like no good, or you have to try and make a sour, which is a whole nother process. But so you clean everything. You have it comes like some kits come with like cleaner. I've been using bleach, mixture of bleach and water, and then just rinse things out really well. So after you're trying to cool it down, you have to keep the pot covered as you do it, so that no air gets over it. You have to be careful where you breathe. You don't want to be breathing over the beer or anything like that. Like you want to while you're trying to smell it, you want to waft to it. For one thing about the smell is you could actually smell the change in the beer as you add the hops to it, and you could taste it along the way, and you could taste how it starts changing a little bit. And so you cool it, then you take it and you put it into your fermenting tank. That has to be really clean as well. Like, again, no breathing on it, like anything like that. You want to be careful how you handle it and stuff. You put it in your fermenting tank, and you also want to take a measure with the hydrometer. So this thing is called a hydrometer, and it gives you a specific gravity of the beer itself. And using your starting specific gravity and your final specific gravity after fermenting, it allows you to calculate your alcohol content of your beer, because it tells you how much sugars have been processed from the yeast into alcohol. You use your little graduated cylinder for that too. But then it's typically about 2 weeks of waiting after you put in the fermenting tank. You can see there's a piece that sits on top of the tank on the cover. I don't know where it is right now. And it sits on top of the tank, and you can see bubbles come out of it, because as the yeast are processing the sugars into alcohols, they produce some gas as well, and you have to be careful. If you have it too full, you could actually, it foams up, and you could blow over and create a huge mess. And also, that's a good way to contaminate your beer as well, because you break the seal and stuff then. But it's 2 weeks of waiting, and then you get to bottle. And so when you bottle it, you take it and you put it from your fermenting tank into your priming tank. So your priming tank is just another clean tank, at which point you add your priming sugar to it, because now your beer's beer. It's just not carbonated, and so, but most of the sugars have been processed out of it by the yeast already, so you need more sugar for the yeast to turn into the carbonation in the beer itself. So you add your priming sugars to your priming tank, you stir it up, and you want to keep mixing it as you're filling your bottles, so that you don't get one bottle with too much sugar in it, because then it could over-pressurize that bottle and explode it. So you need to also be careful, though, that the yeast is done fermenting, because if it's not done fermenting, and the yeast is becoming less active, if they're too active, they'll process too much of the sugars again, and they'll pop the bottles. So typically, 5-gallon batch makes about 2 cases of beer. You can buy bottles, or what I do is just drink beer, and then save the bottles, clean the bottles out, wash them, bleach it, cleaning solution at least, and then scrub the labels off and stuff, which is probably the hardest part. Then you take the bottles and you get your, where's the capper? It's in this one. You have a capper like this, and it rests on top of the bottle like this, and then you just push down on the sides and it crimps it down onto the sides. I have a different one that my brother-in-law and I use, that it's like a press that you crank down and it just pushes down onto it and pushes the sides closed at the same rate. Then it's probably another week and a half of waiting for the beer to actually be carbonated by the yeast inside of it still, at which point you can keep it cold or put it into cellar temperatures, because then it'll kill off the yeast so it stops carbonating, so you don't blow up any bottles or anything. And also, that's when you can start aging it. The second batch of beer I made, I didn't really like after I first made it, but after aging it, it settled out and the flavors changed and it tasted much better. So after the first week after carbonation, I hated it. I really didn't like it. I was very disappointed. I was really sad about it. But then about a month later, I went back and I had a couple more. And I was like, all right, it's matured now. It doesn't taste like some of the for some reason it tasted plasticky. That taste went away, and it was actually pretty good. But that's pretty much how to do home brewing. It's a lot of cleanup too. You gotta be careful, but it's totally worth it. It's a good way to relax and enjoy beer.
Yeah.